Hey guys, and welcome to the How to Play Carnevale series.
Woohoo!
So, we're in Venice. Rome has been wiped off the map by this massive rend that has taken place. Italy has been split in two, the Mediterranean has flooded in, and in Venice, everything's starting to change. What was a city that had been about opulence and decadence is now pretty much about survival.
And decadence.
And decadence, yeah. The decadence is still there. Yes. So we have this game that is all about adventure. You know, this is a game where it's so narrative and there's so much cinematography or cinematography in it.
You can really see what's happening when you play this game.
Yeah.
You can really imagine what's going on.
So in this series of videos, we're going to take you through how to play, but there are a few quick things that we need to go over with you in this first video. So this first video is going to try and start to set the groundwork for what some of the things that you need to be aware of in the game. First up is the game uses D10s. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with D10s. It's a 10-sided dice. We call it a 1D10. You might have 5D10, which is 5 of them. A D10, if you have to do, for example, a D5, D5 is simply you roll your 10-sided dice, you divide the result in half, and then round it up. And in this game, whenever you're doing anything like that, you always round it up. Next thing is a concept of a dice pool. And later on, we'll be going through the stat card of a typical unit or character in a game of Carnevale. But if, for example, you take dexterity gives you a number, whether it be 5, 6, 4. That is actually the number of dice that you would roll potentially for a dexterity roll. Yeah. A dexterity test. So,
for example, if we take this guy who's a noble leader, he has dexterity of something like 6. Mm-hmm. So for him, when you're checking on his dexterity, you would be rolling 6 dice.
Yeah. The other thing that you must understand about a dice pool is whenever you roll dice in Carnevale, you have to roll one of those 6 dice or 4 dice or whatever has to be of a different color. And that dice is the destiny die. Now, the destiny die basically starts to turn this game on its head to some degree.
Adds a nice random element.
It starts to take a dice roll and it creates those heroic moments or those colossal failures when you're expecting something to work and it can just all go wrong, or when you're thinking to yourself, I'm just going to go for it, I'm going to try it, and then suddenly the destiny dice rolls in your favor and things start going very, very well. To give you an example, in movement, if we were going to run a character, you would roll on their dexterity. So if a character had a dexterity of 4, the dice pool would be 4. And one of those 4 dice would be that red destiny dice, in my case. You would roll those 4 dice, and what you would be looking for are 7s.
Good
7
roll.
is a magic number in Carnevale, and it's in a lot of the dice rolls you're trying to achieve these 7s. So in this case, I'm looking for 7s for a success. So this is a 0, which is actually a 10 on a D10, so that's a success. This is a 9, so that's a success. This is a 5, that's not a success. And this on the destiny roll is a 7, so that is a success.
Should point out, in Carnevale, you call successes aces.
Aces, yes. So if my standard movement was 4, in this case, I'd be able to go 4, 5, 6, 7, and I would be able to move 7 inches. However, let me show you the power of the destiny die. So if the destiny die rolled a 10, that's called a critical, okay? And that's a very good thing, because in this case, these successes would still be worth 1 inch each. But my destiny die would be worth 1 inch for the fact that it was a success, plus another 3 inches of additional movement because it was a critical. And the destiny die can be different things depending on the different kind of roles and scenarios
It'll
that you're
have
trying to
different
make.
effects depending on what you've used it in.
So that's in that case, I would have my 4 inches of normal movement, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches. So you can see how much of an effect, positive effect, it can have. But it can work the other way.
Yes, it can hurt, as I found out.
You roll a 1, in this instance, it would be a failure, but you would also remove one of your successes. So in this case, you would
only have the one
only
success.
have the one success. If you had rolled the others and you didn't have any success, so if this had been a 6, a 2, and a 5, and you rolled a 1, then that's called a fumble. And in movement, for example, that would cause your character just to trip. They would trip over themselves and they wouldn't go anywhere at all. So you can see how that one destiny die really lives up to the name that it has of shaping the destiny of that individual character.
It can really all come down to that destiny die, that strategy you've spent all of the term carefully assembling can be obliterated or come off unbelievably well because of that dice.
And I have enjoyed
this
very much
has.
in the testing games that we've been playing. It has been amazing.
The dice gods love this man.
They do. It's because I charge my dice with laser beams, guys. I've been telling you this for months. Right. Next thing I want to discuss are the types of roll. There are 3 basic types of roll in Carnevale. There's your kind of standard roll, which is where you're aiming for 7s, and you're rolling off your dice pool, you're aiming for 7s, and your destiny die can have whatever effect it has in that particular case. Next up, you have attack rolls, and attack rolls are used in close combat, and that's where you find out your opponent's dexterity, and if he has a dexterity of 5, whenever you roll your dice, you're trying to score 5 or above.
Instead of the usual 7.
Instead of the usual 7 or and above. And if they have a dexterity 6, you're trying to score 6 and above. And then finally, you have the opposing roll, which we're going to demonstrate to you now.
I've got my dice.
So, Sam, do you want to talk us through the opposing roll?
Yeah, the opposing roll, say if I was trying to get out of combat, say this guy and this guy over here.
So if you're interested, we have this is a Lord, is it?
Yeah.
And here we have a hybrid.
Rashar. One of the Cthulhu-esque boys. Mm-hmm. Basically, if I wanted to just escape from combat, he could take an opportunity attack, which we'll probably talk about later, or he can try and stop me from escaping. We take an opposed dexterity roll.
Yes.
We both roll on our dexterity. I have 6, so I'd be rolling 6 dice, including my destiny dice.
And for the sake of just a demonstration here, I'm going to assume that my guy has 4. Okay.
Okay.
So we both roll off,
and then we count up the number of aces we each got.
I remember an ace is a 7. Okay, so a 7 gives you an ace. So
in this, you're just going by the standard. 7.
So I have 2 aces.
I have 4 aces. Wow, that's the best roll I've had all day.
So in this case, Sam would deduct 2, which would be the 2 that I'd have, which means he beats me by 2, and that means that he would win that opposing roll by 2, and then those 2 would have an effect on the game.
And I can leg it away into the sunset.
So, modifiers we're going to be coming to in later videos, but there are modifiers. But the thing that you need to understand for the moment on modifiers is there's never a modifier that affects the difficulty of the roll. Well, how the modifiers work is just by simply removing dice. So this game gets very, very easy to play and very quick to play as you start to get to grips with the rules. And it's just simply a matter of removing or adding dice to your dice pool. The game uses character sheets, okay?
Yeah. And
these character sheets give you the full breakdown of the attributes of a character. And we're going to talk you through them in a as best in order as we can. There's quite a bit on the character sheet, but it does become very self-explanatory as you start working
when
through
you
the game.
first see it, you might think there is a lot of info on this, but it's really easy to tell once you get to grips with the game.
Yes, it is, and they're very clearly laid out. The first thing is name. Because, believe it or not, you actually get to name your characters in this game.
Very much like a role-playing game or something like that.
And that's important because one of the key things of Carnevale is, Carnevale is, yes, you can do just a pick-up-and-play game. You and a mate just play a little battle or a skirmish on the table. But where it really comes to life is when your characters start to develop through multiple encounters, multiple adventures, and into almost like a campaign mode where it has an actual campaign system.
A proper story running through it.
Yeah, the characters themselves will develop, and they have leaders and as well. So.
This guy, for example, I named Sir Pantalone, simply because it's the only Venetian name I know.
Venetian names, we have been thinking about this, so your best bet is to check on Google, but what we're going to try and do is a little piece of more tip. We're going to see if we can come up with a list of Venetian names to help you guys get a start on naming them.
I tend to take the view that if you put an A at the end of the name, then it's Italian.
Or Eone.
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 You just have to have that A at the end of the word.
The next thing is you have the class of the character itself. So it might have a class of a butcher or a hybrid. The class is discussed very much in the rule book. There are descriptors. For example, the butcher is descriptor is human, but there's other descriptors like leader and thief that we'll be coming to in more detail in later videos. We have, for the leaders, command points, okay?
Yeah, they're very useful.
This is a game that's based on action points. So characters have a number of actions that they can spend during their turn in a round. So the structure of the game, just to recap, is a round consists of player one, Sam, moving a character, that character's turn. Then at the end of his character's turn, I get to move my character, and that character has a turn, and that continues all the way through both of our squads or our army that we have on the table until they've all had a turn, and then that's the end of the round, and then it moves to the next round.
Each round you decide who goes first by rolling an initiative test, and that's using command points.
Yes. So these command points, only your, for the purposes of this video, your leader has some command points that he can spend. He cannot spend command points on himself to allow him to do extra actions, but he can stand and go, you do this, you do that, and the rest of his squad can avail of those command points. So there's an interesting thing to remember about command points, and it's worth remembering. Command points have two major effects in the game. The first is it allows you to spend those command points to give your other characters the ability to do something extra.
Yeah.
So maybe they've spent their 2 action points or their 3 action points, but they're this close to being able to push a character off a building or push a character into the water, or they've managed to get up to a character and now they want to attack him, but they don't have command points of their own. You could spend a central command point to be able to make that happen.
Yeah.
So this is where your heroic moments and things come in, where you got a character just to that point, and yes, you have the ability for them to go that step
You can
further.
also see the guy, your leader guy, standing there telling people where to go, what to do. It creates a good sense of the guy actually being a leader.
So it's all about heroic moments, guys. But be careful about spending your command points, because your command points are used to try and determine the initiative roll at the start of a round.
And you don't get them back.
No, you don't get them back. So your command points make up the pool of dice that you would use to determine who gets to go first in any particular round. So if you're aggressive at spending command points, like I am, get used to going second in this game. Next up, you would have the cost of a character, and that could be like from 24 points to 48 points, and it's just a standard points cost that you would all be familiar with. Then you have the action points, and these are the standard action points that any character can spend themselves, and an action allows you to perform actions like moving, shooting, close combat, jumping, running jump, running along walls,
Which is
then,
awesome.
then leaping and shooting at an opponent and landing on somebody else and then
And-
stabbing him in the throat. Yeah, you get the idea anyway.
And
So
rowing
it's-
gondolas.
if you're looking for a game that has some of the most extraordinary cinematic actions, this is it. And that is what has completely drawn me to this game, is the fact that I can live out an adventure on the tabletop with this. And I can give you an idea of a special moment we had
that was a
where
great moment.
Sam had a character that made a dash towards a canal and then made this extraordinary leap over the top of the canal. And on my side, I was going, brah, he's jumped right into my territory. And what I had to defend it was I had this little old lady with massive attributes who came running towards him, and through the effective use of a single command point at the end of her action, was able to shove the guy back into the canal again. So you get this sense of incredible movement and flow and stuff like that in the game.
My noble was very upset about that. Do you know how much silk costs?
So action points are just they are the number of actions. And here's the best way to describe what they represent. Some characters in this game are fast, agile. They're able to accomplish a lot of things in a set amount of time. Whereas other characters are maybe more slow and cumbersome and can't accomplish the same amount of actions in that same amount of time. So that's why some characters will have more action points than others. It just gives them that greater sense of dexterity, of fleet as they move
think
around
there
the
was
board.
a rather nice little example in this where it mentioned how one guy could run up the side of a wall, run across the rooftops, steal the jewels or whatever, and run away again, while another guy's still trying to cross the street.
Yes, yeah, and it can have that kind of effect where you have the cumbersome, whereas versus something that just is much more dexterity, fleet of foot. Next we have karma. Now karma points are like little bonus points that can be spent to get you extra dice in your dice pools when you need them. So every character has a certain amount of karma that they can spend. However, if you spend all your karma, you're then going to start getting -1s on your dice rolls. So you've got to be careful about karma. The interesting thing about karma, though, is don't be afraid to spend it, because
It's very useful.
it does help you make those particular dice rolls that you want to make, and you can pick karma up through playing the game. So there are points where if your character
Has just killed someone.
has just killed someone, for example, they can pick up a point of karma again. But you'll never go above the initial karma that you have, and it's nicely laid out on the character sheet.
I like the fact it seems almost a twisted karma. You know the whole thing about karma getting you back if you do an evil deed? Here you do an evil deed, you're like, yeah, more karma. Come on, take more.
That's Venice for you. On the other side, we have the life points, okay? And the life points are basically like the wounds of any particular character. And life points are quite interesting because we have a concept called pain thresholds, okay? So in the life points, you might have 3 boxes that are completely clear. So if I lose a life point, I put a mark through one, which means I'm still fine. If I lose another one, guess what? I'm still fine. If I lose my third one, well, the next one actually has a little -1 in it. And what that means is I have now reached a pain threshold, which means that all my rolls from this point on are actually -1 dice. On the butcher, I would have another -1. So I would stay at that pain threshold for 2 life points. And then the next one is then a -2, which means I've hit a whole other pain threshold where I would lose 2 of my dice.
It's really
whenever
starting
I'm
to
doing it,
hurt
and it's
now.
really starting to hurt. So there's a really interesting concept of pain threshold and life points. You know, these characters have a little bit of longevity about them. They're not going to just die at the very slightest thing, but it does have a major effect on them. and you can sense the fact that they become less effective. They become hurt. You can feel the pain of these guys as they're going through
in our game, I don't think anybody died.
No.
But they did cross pain thresholds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we were just playing an objective game where the priority was the objective, not necessarily killing the enemy. Now we move to the actual main stats. This is the main stat line of the actual character itself, and it kicks off with movement. And movement is quite simply the number of inches that a character can move.
The basic value is usually 4 for a normal human.
Some more energetic characters would have 5, and maybe even go a little bit higher than that. Next we have combat, and combat is a dice pool. So that is the number of dice that you would roll during a combat, and you would compare that with the dexterity of the opponent that you were fighting in close combat. So if I had a combat pool of 3, I would roll 3 dice. Remember, always including your destiny die, and I would compare that against the dexterity of a character, and if they had 6s, I'm trying to get 6s or above on those die.
Should point out that while dice can be removed from your pool, as it were, the destiny die is always the last one to go.
Yes, you cannot. It is the last dice. You have to remove other dice before that one. Next up, you have dexterity, which is a dice pool again, and that's whenever you're taking tests for example, or running or jumping or just any number of different kinds of maneuver and stuff you can do. Then you have shooting. That's a dice pool as well. So shooting, you might have 4 dice, 2 dice. Some characters may not have any shooting whatsoever. Next up, we come to mind. And mind is, again, can be a dice pool. And when I say dice pool, some of these stats can also just be used as a stat as well that it's compared to. And mind would be used for casting magic, or it could be used to determine and maybe even an attack on you in terms of your sanity.
It's also used to deal with draws when you're doing the initiative roll at the beginning. If you've both got the same, then you then go by whoever's got the highest mind.
Yeah. And then finally, you have protection. And protection is kind of like the armor, the toughness of a particular character. So whenever attacks are made on the character, the number of aces is reduced by the number that's in protection, and then it's whatever's left is then the points that are actually would cause or a deduction in life points.
We'll get onto that more when we do.
Yeah, we will. But it's a beautiful mechanic. One roll is all you need to determine whether you hit the character and how much you damage the character. There's no multiple rolls. There's no need for saving throws. It's all built into the mechanic, and in that sense,
makes it a very quick game.
It is quick. It's fast flowing. It has a lovely feel to it. Then you come to your universal abilities. And universal abilities might have abilities such as ambidextrous, defensive combat, mighty blow, first strike, or reroll dice. There's a whole thing on universal abilities, and we're going to be doing a series of videos just looking at universal abilities, and we'll talk about them and how they're used. Then you have your special abilities. And special abilities can you think of a special ability?
Well, that would be more the abilities particular to that character. For instance, here we've got the Harlequin, who's one of the gifted. That's basically one of the superheroes. And he has a special ability that gives him like a multiple presence. So when he first comes into play, there's almost like 3 counters, and you can't tell which one of them is him.
Is the real one.
Yeah.
So these special abilities give the characters even more kind of unique flavor. And then finally you have equipment, and equipment might be the kind of weapons that they're carrying, or any other specialist equipment that they would have, like the ability to rappel down a building and things like that. Yes, believe me, you can actually rappel down buildings as well. So finally, you have spells, and that's where you would list the spells that you have purchased. And remember, the likes of equipment and spells and stuff, you have the ability to purchase these things by spending points. Spells, for example, there's a spell called Cursed, which it would have a range of like 6 inches. You cast it on a character, and you'd be able to deduct one of their kind of stat line by 1.
It might not sound like much, but when you're coming down to those rolls, that can be very crucial.
It can actually. It's the difference.
Yeah.
Small things can make a big difference.
It's the difference between big fiery balls coming from the sky and actually a more subtle intrinsic form of magic.
Yeah. And then finally you would have a little space for your notes. So, templates. Let's get a little chat about the templates. There are templates in the rulebook, but you can also download the templates from the website. And there's only 2 types of template currently that are used in the game. We will show you that, and that is their area templates. One is a cone, and the other is a form of blast template.
They'd be used for things like spells, the doctor's weaponry, grenades, that sort of stuff.
And then finally, you have the numbers here. You can see these numbers are for the multiple presence of the Harlequin, and then you have tokens. So these tokens are for stunned counters. Now, stunned, let me give you an example. When I had been talking about the pain thresholds, when you reach a particular pain threshold, your character would receive a stunned counter, but we'll move more onto that later. These are activation counters, where whenever you're finished with a miniature, you would put an activation counter beside it to show that it had been activated.
Helps you keep track of your minis.
And then the others in there are the hidden counters for to mark which miniatures are hidden, so in other words they can't be seen or they couldn't be shot at. And then finally, at the ready counters, and at the ready is another lovely mechanic in this game, where you could spend an action point at the end of a turn and place a miniature at the ready. And the minute you put a miniature at the ready, that is the end of their turn. They are now sitting ready that if anything attacks them, they actually get the opportunity to attack back as well. So
I had a guy sitting at the ready waiting for you just to see how this worked, and you just went, nah.
Yeah, but I avoided him specifically because he was at the ready. It acted as a deterrent to me, and I thought, I think I'm not going to get stuck in there because there's a good chance that I might lose that.
Yeah, that's why I wanted you to.
So, we had talked about the game and initiative rules. Let me talk you through setting up the game. So, the first thing you're going to need is somewhere to play. As you can see, we have an absolutely beautiful table made by one of the stores. Their name is appearing on screen here, maybe with a URL, so you can go and check them out. They've done an absolutely gorgeous job on this. It's made from it's hand sculpted from foam, guys, and it's a lovely, lovely piece of work. And maybe if we get a chance, we'll show you these and talk in detail about how they achieved the effect of this table.
We've got some nice little Venetian landmarks as well here. We've got, I think this is the Rialto Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So things that you're going to need. You're going to need street surfaces, which you can just lay out, and you're going to need water and canals. And the reason for this is they play, but because it's Venice, and they play a big part in the game because
you need the canals. You
really
really do.
Them. So canals, to begin with, guys, you could just download and print some stuff out, set some boxes and things like that up to give you, a bit more density.
Even just a bit of tinfoil.
Even tinfoil would act as water. Each adventure will give you an idea of the amount of terrain, but this game plays beautifully with terrain. Terrain doesn't hold this game back. It works nice in open spaces where there's maybe water between different spaces because it acts as it changes the dynamic of the movement through the game. But if you have, for example, Warhammer terrain and things like that lying around,
you want some things with balconies and the
chuck it on because these characters can run across rooftops, they can run across walls, Prince of Persia style, while jumping down and knifing somebody through the throat. Yeah, I'm getting carried away again.
You can basically rattle them around the table like a ping pong ball.
Yeah, get yourself some terrain, guys. Go and check out Dave Graffam or some of the printout terrain companies. Terraclips is another option. There's lots of cost-effective terrain things out there. Believe me, if you get some stuff where you can print out some streets, canals, print out a few buildings, maybe a couple of bridges, it's just going to change the game for you. And it's well worth investing the time and energy, and if you've got it, some money in doing that, because it just sets this game alight. But you don't need it. You'll quite happily play a game of this with cardboard boxes, or stuff that you craft out of paper or anything. But the important thing is, check the adventure that you're going to play in the rulebook, because it'll give you a description of the layout. Now, the other thing is that in the adventure, it'll not only tell you how to lay out the terrain and things like that, but it'll also give you a breakdown on the deployment, okay? And deployment could be as simple as doing an initiative roll and somebody choose a side of a table, or it might be more specific about how things are deployed and where an objective is likely to be. Finally, you would then do an initiative roll to see who would deploy their miniature first. So in this instance, I'm going to do an initiative roll against Sam, just to recap for you. So if I had a command pool of 4 versus Sam's command pool of 5, I would roll my 4 dice, including my destiny die. Just roll them there. And in this instance, I'm looking for 7s. And I have only scored 1 ace on the actual destiny die
Let's
itself.
see if I can beat that. No. Oh, I've got 1 ace.
And Sam has 1 ace as well, which is perfect. It was exactly what I was hoping for. In this case, you would then move to the mind stat, and I would have mind of 6 versus Sam's mind of 4, because he's inferior to me.
I am a noble,
so,
Sirrah.
In that point, I would get to deploy a miniature. Again, the deployment would be listed in the adventure, or it might be as simple as 5 inches from the back of your deployment zone. Once I'd finished deploying that miniature, Sam would get to deploy, then I'd get to deploy, and back and forth until all the miniatures
Just take
are
it
deployed.
turnabout.
So, that's the first part, guys. That gets you a feel for how some of the mechanics, how the dice rolling and what works, and what you need to play, what you need to get together. So stay tuned to the next part, where we start to look at things like the whole cinematographic movement of this game, and just how you move around the world of Carnevale.